Hello, this is going to be my video demonstration of the beginner's route for Okami New Game Any %. I'm making this video to go with my existing text guide, which means that it will not necessarily introduce new information. It's more so to be a companion guide meant to give a more visual explanation of certain tricks or certain things that are being done throughout the run. In that way, I'm going to try and go over all of the same information so that you could use either one independently or together. So if you ever find me talking at length about something you already understand, feel free to skip ahead. This series will be in multiple videos because there's a lot to go over and I don't really feel like doing it all in one sitting. And also, there's no guarantee that this will remain exactly in correspondence with the text guide because when something new gets discovered and say I want to add it to the beginner's route, it would be a lot easier to add it to the text route than it would be to make a video about it. And for that reason, you should probably at least take a look at the corresponding section in the beginner's route for each of the videos that I'm going to be making. I'll try and list in the title what segments each video covers. My intention right now is in this segment to cover everything up through Agata 2, as is listed in the guide. So not Agata 2, I mean everything up through Shinshu 2. So this won't include Agata, but it will be everything up to you entering Agata. To start with, I'm going to go over the notes section in the guide. As I said before, this is the New Game Any % category. This is one of two main categories for Okami. The other one being a New Game Plus Any %, which is a much faster run because it includes the Karmic Transformer glitch, which is essentially a type of infinite jump glitch that allows the route to go through the bare minimum of what brush techniques are needed to defeat the final boss rush so that you can access Yami and beat the game. Which is a lot easier said than done, but it essentially means that you jump over every barrier in the game, which allows you to get through things much more quickly. In this route, we're a lot more restricted. Since we don't have an infinite jump, we can only get out of bounds per se, and break barriers and sequence break, when there's geometry that permits it. And for that reason, in the beginner's route, and for that reason I should say, there's a beginner's route and there's also two variants of an advanced route because of one particular skip, one particular sequence break that is very difficult to perform because it requires, or it abuses some very narrow geometry, let's say. The main trick I'm describing here is City Checkpoint Skip, or CC Skip. You can find videos about it linked in the text guide, but to put it lightly, it's a trick that saves about 25 minutes, which is quite a lot. Mainly it skips the Moon Cave, but it's incredibly difficult to perform, and you would probably find it rather disheartening to run up against it when you're just learning the run. Personally, I recommend learning the beginner's route first, and then incorporating the City Checkpoint Skip once you've learned all of the basic, once you've gotten experience with all of the basic concepts in the run. And there's a lot of things like that that really don't vary much between the beginner's route and the advanced routes, but which will help you and be a lot easier to learn in the beginner's route. The other major skip that we don't do in this run is Fire Tablet Skip. This is a skip that's only really helpful, it's only really necessary if you're competing for world record, but it's incredibly difficult. I've made a separate video explaining how to do it if you really want to, but I'm just going to say I really, really don't recommend you learn that one until you're very experienced at running the game. Even more so than City Checkpoint Skip. The other thing I want to say right off the bat is version compatibility. You'll see right now I'm playing on the Switch version. In particular, I'm playing on the Japanese language of the Switch version. All of the 2017 and on remakes, or remasters of the game, are equally viable for this run because loading times are pretty much equalized across categories, or across the versions, I should say. So they're all quite good. Whichever one you have or find most convenient if you're considering purchasing one of them, purchase whichever one. A lot of people speedrun on the PC version. I will say the one major advantage that the PC version has is that we have some auto splitter software, which uses memory, or it basically keeps an eye on the game's memory to look when certain game variables change in order to decide when to split. That's totally fine to use, it's allowed, and it can be helpful if you don't want to split manually. For all the other versions, there's obviously no auto splitter that works by memory available, but you can always use the software auto split, which is image based. You might have a hard time finding it, but you can find it on GitHub. It's by Tofool, Toufool. You'll probably have to make your own images based on your stream layout, or whatever your recording layout is, but I've personally used it for many of my runs, and I find it, while it's difficult to learn how to use, it's quite reliable once you've mastered it. And it saves the time for splitting, but obviously, that's just a convenience, not strictly necessary. All of the other modern remasters are perfectly valid. You will probably not want to run this particular category if you're playing on the PS2, Wii, or PS3 versions. Mainly the PS2 and PS3 versions, they do not have cutscene skips in new game. This means that you're going to be spending a lot of time watching cutscenes, which makes the run like hours longer. It's really quite a pain, and I would strongly not recommend using either of those versions. The Wii version, strangely, does have new game cutscene skips. Don't ask me why they removed it from the PS3 version. The issue is that the Wii version has longer load times than all of the 2017 remasters, and it's also notoriously unstable. It has a tendency to crash, and in a relatively long run like this one, it's a big risk that you'd prefer not to take. And of course it also has motion controls, which most people are not fond of, although maybe you would enjoy that. If you do enjoy motion controls, you can actually get the Switch version, which uses the gyroscope sensitivity on the Joy-Con in order to implement motion controls. Personally, I don't like it, but it's up to you to try. The Switch version also has touchscreen controls, but you can only use those in handheld mode, which obviously you wouldn't be able to record your run then, at least not easily. And I haven't really seen any need to use those anyway. And I believe the PC version also lets you control with the mouse and keyboard, but if you're comfortable with that, you can try it. I wouldn't recommend it. As for language, in this particular game, you can skip almost all text, and most text you can't skip, you can speed up dramatically by holding this button on my controller. You're going to be seeing these all relative to the Switch version's control scheme, but they shouldn't be hard to figure out what I'm doing anyway. Basically, there's a fast text button, and if you hold it, it'll automatically skip through text frame perfectly while speeding it up. Whenever it can be sped up, that is. The issue is, even with all of that together, there's still a fair amount of text in this run, and using Japanese will save between like 30 seconds and a minute across the entire run, which is not very much considering the length of the run. It's probably fine, or it's totally fine, to speedrun on your native tongue in your first few runs, while you get used to the menus, the names of items, and certain other things. But once you've memorized the layout of things, you don't really need to know what language the game is in order to play it effectively. The only case where you need to read anything in-game is something that's actually going to be in this segment. We're going to be doing a wanted list fight where you need to know the name of an enemy that pops up. It's quite easy to do this even if you don't have any experience with Japanese. You really just have to memorize either a kanji or a few hiragana. It's quite easy. Even if you don't want to do that, memorizing the entire set of hiragana for Japanese is really easy. You can do it in a couple days. So, again, it's not hard, but you don't have to play on Japanese in your first few runs because it doesn't make a big difference for time. The other thing that's important for this category is the fact that it's single segment. You can't save and load a save during the run because that disrupts the game's play time. And this category, or all main categories for Okami, are timed by in-game time. And of course, it has to be completely single segment in general. There is a feature in this game called gold gates. There's a few gates throughout the game where if you die later on after passing through them, you'll automatically load back into the gate. And there's a few times where that's actually helpful, as like a backup. Those are allowed because they don't disrupt the in-game time. As long as you just continue playing through in one segment, you're fine. And of course, we're going to be using lots of glitches here. That's perfectly allowed. Just no hacking, no controller modifications that make techniques easier, although there's not really anything like that in this game. And of course, there's a few common abbreviations. I'm not really going to go through them, I'm just going to mention them as they come up. So, all of that said, I've been talking for several minutes. So I'll probably just leave a timestamp in the description explaining when I actually start the run. And that's going to be about now, maybe like 12 minutes in. So, to start the run, we're going to be using this option here, the top option here. It's like start playing the game, new file, basically. You're not allowed to use this option, which is loading a save. Even if you load a normal save, just don't do it. As soon as you press the confirm button, which in my case is the A button here, on this button, that's when you should start your timer. So I usually hold one hand over my keyboard on my split key, and then I hold my other hand on the controller here, and I press them both at the same time. Right at the start here, you're going to see this loading screen for the first cutscene. At about the 9-second mark, you should start mashing your skip button, which in my case is the plus button here, for this first cutscene. Then there's another cutscene here, and then there's going to be a loading screen, and then there's going to be another cutscene. And at this point, you should start mashing the tackle button in order to move Ami as soon as that cutscene ends. The first place we load into here is Cursed Kamiki, and you instantly have control because we skipped the cutscene before this. The first thing you should be doing, again, is mashing the tackle button, which is this button here. This is an attack which immediately speeds up Ami to the first level of dash, which is something I'll be explaining in a minute, or I'll explain it right now. But we're going to want to go basically directly into this tree, and I just accidentally did that. So immediately after you go into the tree, you're going to be wanting to mash skip after the loading zone to skip Isun's text there. This is something we're going to be doing often, is mashing start or plus or whatever button you use to skip text and to skip cutscenes. In general, you don't have to mash particularly well, but there's a lot of variance in timing, so it does help to have some mashing skill in order to skip things as quickly as possible. But it's not that important. It's a few fractions of a second you'd lose on every one, which there aren't that many. There's maybe like several dozen throughout the run, so at most you would lose like under a minute from bad skips throughout the run. But it's really not that hard to mash. In my case, I just do this. I just mash the start button with the traditional mashing method. You do whatever's comfortable for you. So as a start, I'm going to explain the dash mechanics in this game. I'm not really going to explain these too briefly because I actually have a video on it, which I just released, and that'll be linked in the description, and I strongly recommend you watch that video first. But if you've already watched it or you really don't want to watch it, the gist is, as Ami moves around, she has 3 speeds that she can move around in. There's walking, like this, which is quite slow. There's green dash, like this, which is about 30% faster, so a lot faster. And then if you move around in green dash for a while, you'll get a second level of dash, which normally has a yellow trail behind it, but doesn't until a bit later in the game. And this is called gold dash, because of the gold colored trail. Gold dash is about another 30% faster than green dash, and it's what we want to be doing most of the time in order to move as quickly as possible. It also affects the distance of your jumps, your ground speed, because it goes into your airspeed. So there's some places where we need gold dash in order to make a jump, because we need as much distance as possible. But that's not going to come up for a while, so don't worry too hard about it. The other thing that's worth mentioning is if you ever walk around on the ground, you'll lose your level of dash and you'll just start walking again. If this happens, if you ever lose your dash, just tackle to get up to that green dash as fast as possible, and avoid doing that in the future so that you can maintain gold dash. This also happens if you go into that braking animation that Ami just did. In order to conserve dash, we're going to be jumping into cutscenes which stores your level of dash, green dash or gold dash, so that we can get going as soon as possible, and then when the cutscene ends, we're going to jump out of it, and then when we land, the game will automatically give us back the level of dash we had. The first cutscene trigger you're going to want to jump into like this is going to be here before the save mirror. The second one is going to be over there across the bridge at the other end, which is right here. And we're going to be mashing start for all of these times when Isun's talking. One thing you might have noticed there is that I couldn't skip the cutscene right away. The camera would pan a bit, and then I was able to skip. This is sort of a general common thread in Okami cutscenes. You can't skip camera pans. You can only skip text, unless it's a certain type of cutscene, which we won't be seeing much of until later. Actually, we'll be seeing one in this segment. Never mind. The gist is, some cutscenes you can skip right away, some you have to wait until text comes up, and some cutscenes are entirely unskippable camera pans, and you just can't skip them. But there aren't too many of those, and they're not too long, so don't worry about it. Right now, the intended path that the game is trying to take us is that direction over there, in order to show us the wall jump tutorial, but we can already wall jump without going through the tutorial, so we're just going to wall jump up here, then air tackle over this gate. That's the terminology I'm going to be using. This is dashing. This is a tackle. They're not the same thing. This is the closest to the in-game terminology as we can get, so it's what I prefer just to avoid confusion. This is a ground tackle, air tackle, dashing. So here's another cutscene here. Isun's going to rejuvenate this bridge for us. Then there's going to be another cutscene here over these pots, where we're going to see the sign. And then we're going to go up this hill, and here we're going to get our first brush power, which is going to be rejuvenation. But we're going to skip cutscene first. Then you hold your brush button. Anytime you're expecting to use the brush, you should be just holding the brush button, because holding it makes it activate as soon as possible. In this case, we just need to draw a single dot for the constellation. Drawing dots for constellations is actually very imprecise. It's quite forgiving, so I could probably draw it like here, and that's fine. And I think I could even be a lot more loose with it anyway. And we're going to skip as soon as that ends as well. This applies to all constellations. You draw all the stars, you release, and then you skip. That's the general pattern. In this particular case, the important thing about drawing stars for constellations, in order to get the game to recognize that you drew them in the right place, isn't so much the placement, because like I said, it's quite forgiving. It's more so that your brush isn't moving when you draw the star. So if you see here, I can draw dots while the brush is moving, but these are all recognized as sort of smeared stars by the game, which aren't allowed in constellations. The game never tells you this, it's rather unclear, but you actually have to let the brush come to a stop, which it does instantly, but you have to let go of the control stick basically, before you press the brush button in order to draw the star. So this is a regular star, this is a smeared star. So you can see it has a slightly different brush mark, unless you do it quite quickly, but even then, neither one is allowed. You have to let go of the control stick, and then draw the star. So that's just a minor thing. I see a lot of people mess up constellations a lot. It's, as long as you know that you're not allowed to be moving the brush, it's quite easy. So we can conserve dash through this with more jumps, and there's another cutscene right here, at the same stone as before. Then we're going to be using rejuvenation for the first time. So if you're good on your positioning and your angle, you can do this in a single stroke, but you might have to do two. You'll also see here I'm actually drawing a wider stroke than normal, or a thicker stroke you might say. There's actually an extra button for that, which is, in my case, the X button, the topmost face button. If I hold it, then I can draw a thicker stroke. whereas normally my strokes are more narrow. So you can see I can draw this thicker stroke. I don't really want to do that. Thicker stroke, narrower stroke. There's also another button that you need to know of when you're in the brush mode, which is the B button here, which makes the brush move around faster. So this is the normal brush speed, this is the fast brush speed. Obviously as speedrunners, we want to move the brush around faster in order to get it to where it needs to be faster. The only times you're really not going to want to use the fast brush button are times where you need to be more precise, which does happen. And in those cases, you can just let go of it. It's only active when you're holding it down, and you can even let it go in the middle of a stroke. The same applies to the thick stroke button, which you can also let go of during brushing. Also, if you ever run out of ink, you saw there, Ami will lose her markings and become just a regular wolf. Oh yeah, let me finish explaining running out of ink. When that happens, you lose a lot of your abilities. You can't get a gold or green dash anymore, and if you move around on the ground at all, you'll actually lose your gold or green dash. You can only walk around. You can still ground tackle, but you can't air tackle. And you can still wall jump, but you can't double jump when we get the double jump ability later. That's the most important things to mention. It also affects your attacks in battle, which will come up a lot. And obviously you can't continue to use brush powers in those times. So in general, we're going to try to avoid running out of ink, but we actually have some ways of avoiding that in specific circumstances that are going to come up much later, probably not in this segment. Anyway, while I'm swimming here, you'll see that I'm mashing the B button. This button makes Ami... This is the same as the jump button. This button, when you press it, makes Ami do this little hop in the water, which moves slightly faster than her normal swim speed. So this is her normal swim speed, which is quite slow. But when you mash the B button, you go a bit faster. This is obviously important for speed, but because in most water Ami has a breath meter before she'll start to drown, it's actually quite important to mash the B button when you're swimming in order to avoid drowning so that you get out of the water faster. Because it doesn't increase the speed at which you run out of breath, but it does increase the speed at which you move, which means you spend less time in the water. Once you get out of the water, if you have conserved dash into here, so I'll just do that to demonstrate. If you're not holding a direction on the analog stick, Ami will get out of the water but not move, and then you can jump and still restore dash. This is another thing that's relatively important whenever we run into water, is being able to conserve dash through it by letting go of the control stick before you get to land, which is what we have to do here. Then we have to tackle this particular chest. You can't skip it, or else Isun will yell at you. This is the astral pouch. We're not going to be using it in this run because we never get enough food to fill it up, but in the advanced route you actually happen to get a free fill up on the astral pouch when you get the fire burst power, and that gives you an extra life. Unfortunately, we don't get that in the beginner's route, it's sort of backwards, and that's all we can really do about it. You don't have to jump into this portal, by the way. That's just something unnecessary that I do. Because this is the Cave of Nagi, and it's a separate area from the previous area we were in, which was called the River of the Heavens. So as soon as you get here, you can't conserve dash into here, no matter what. You have to tackle in order to get green dash again. We're just going to take a straight line up the Cave of Nagi, because there's no real obstacles. In general, I prefer to go right of this particular, or left of this particular rock. If you go to over it, Ami will jump, which is slow. And then otherwise, I'm just memorizing which geometry I have to wrap around. And I'm taking the shortest line I can, the straightest path. Also, one thing I should mention here is the camera that I'm using. There's two main camera modes in Okami. There's inner camera, which you're looking at now, where the camera will try to follow behind Ami. It'll turn with her. This is nice for a lot of things, but it's not nice for maintaining a straight line, because if you start to deviate slightly, the camera will try to get behind Ami again, which will mean you just take a more and more curved path. Or at least the path stays at a constant curve. So it's very hard to maintain a directly straight path in inner camera mode. In outer camera mode, the camera won't try to get behind Ami, it'll just hold the same angle as always, which is quite helpful for holding straight lines, and it's what you should be using whenever you're moving across longer distances, when you don't need the camera to follow behind you for any particular reason. There's also a first-person camera mode. You can go into this just by holding the camera button. Unfortunately, if you try to use this while walking, while dashing, Ami will instantly stop, which can cause you to lose your dash, even if you don't go fully into first-person camera mode. So you never want to hold the first-person camera button if you don't have to, just because it'll make you lose your dash. There's a couple times when we deliberately use this, but it's not until very much later, and it's only to abuse the fact that a lot of things in this game are based on distance to the camera rather than distance to Ami. And of course that is quite a narrow range of circumstances, and it doesn't come up often, so I'll mention it when it comes up. Besides that, there's a lot of places in this game where the game will take control of the camera for you. In a lot of cases, when the game takes control of camera from you, when you didn't have it, or when you had it, it'll cause Ami to turn sharply because the camera angle changes suddenly, which will cause her to lose her dash. And unfortunately, you just have to know when those circumstances come up, so you can like jump across when the camera is going to switch, or otherwise just be prepared to lose your dash. And again, I'll mention those when they come up. But in this case, we're just going to be going into the actual Cave of Nagi. We're going to jump here as soon as we get under that log gate, and we can skip this cutscene as soon as he starts talking. Then we can do another restore, and we can restore this just by holding up on the brush as soon as the camera starts switching. That would be your cue. Then we can skip this, and we get Tajigami's constellation where we get Power Slash. And again, we're going to be skipping the constellation. Here, you can just hold the brush button right away, and as soon as the brush comes up, but not before, you can hold the draw button and go straight left. And that'll cut the rock. I've tried to note down in my guide whenever starting from the center will allow you to cut something without having to reposition the brush first. This is one of those cases. The reason I mentioned not holding the draw button before the brush comes up is that actually affects the way the brush works. If I hold that button and then hold the brush button, you can see that the stroke actually starts a bit right of center, or it starts a bit after you move the brush for the first time, rather than starting directly in the center. I don't know exactly why this is the case, but it does affect the recognition on power slashes in a lot of cases. So in general, I would say hold or react to the brush screen coming up, and then press the draw button to move the brush, rather than holding the draw button before the brush comes up. That should help you avoid issues in some places. Here we have to break this barrier. You can jump into the barrier to make it easier to conserve dash, but it's actually possible to draw a horizontal stroke, let go, hold up or forward, whatever is relative to Ami's facing direction, and conserve your dash without leaving the ground, which is a bit faster because your airspeed is technically a bit slower than your ground speed. We're going to be avoiding a fight trigger here. This fight trigger is relatively easy to avoid. You just have to go around the right side here and go to the left of this torch, or well, the right of this torch from this perspective. It's not hard to conserve dash here, I just had to demonstrate it. After that fight skip, which you really shouldn't have much trouble skipping, it's quite a small trigger, there's going to be another fight trigger here, which is a bit larger, but we can still skip it because it's a much larger area. We're going to be going to the right of this gate, and then we're going to be going just through, or just barely to the right of this fern. If we go far to the right of it, then we'll hit the fight trigger, and we'll lose some time. Then again, since these are two different areas, we have to tackle again here, and we're going to be going backwards. Jump before the edge of the water because your airspeed's a bit faster than your swimming speed. and then mash jump again to continue through the water. Before you reach the other side, let go of the analog stick, and jump again to restore your dash. Just as we mentioned when we were first coming through here. Then finally we're just going to go straight, we're going to ignore the taxi cab arrow, and we're going to go directly into the exit. There's going to be a short loading screen here, and then we're instantly going to be given control. I just like mashing tackle rather than holding a direction, because Ami will always tackle in her facing direction, which is this way. And then, as soon as the camera starts changing, you can brush, angle the camera upwards, and cut the peach. You can cut the peach even at the very bottom of it. You don't have to cut the stem exactly, so you can do this far earlier in the camera pan than this. Then you want to mash skip already to skip this big cutscene. Then you wait for the loading zone. All of the loading times are pretty much constant, so you can actually prepare yourself for when this is going to happen, rather than mashing throughout the entire loading screen. Unfortunately, you just have to memorize the length of each loading screen because they're all different, but for each one, it's a constant amount. In that particular case, I know that the paw prints on the bottom, which go like this, and then there's an Isun, all of those, you can sort of count the length of the loading screen by how many paw prints appear. In that case, it was 2 full meters, and then just a single paw print, basically. And then the cutscene came up, and I could skip Isun's text. From here, we're going to be tackling straight forward, and we're going to dash down the hill. You can either talk to Kumuso now, or you can talk to Kumuso a bit later, which I'm going to do for demonstration purposes. In this case, we're going to want to jump off the cliff right about around the position of this first lantern here. And we're looking to land near Mushi here, and we're going to examine his statue, make sure we jump toward him so that we don't lose our dash when we talk to him. And then we're going to jump out of it so we conserve our dash. The same thing applies to Mushi's mom, who's also a statue. And then we're going to do another tackle jump to get away from her, or any other form of dash restore. And then finally we're going to hug this cliff face, and we're going to talk to Kumuso, if you didn't talk to him already. At this point you have the option of going this way and going around the cliff normally, or you can jump up this scaffolding here, which is rather difficult if it's your first time, and it only saves about 8 seconds. But I'm going to demonstrate here because it's a lot, it's more useful to demonstrate this than demonstrate walking around the cliff normally. So what I do is I do a tackle jump off this point in the wall here. The tackle jump gives you a bunch of free momentum, so it's a lot easier to get the wall jump. And then I sort of have muscle memorized how I need to move the analog stick to get onto this beam here from that wall jump. From here, I do another tackle jump, and I tackle off the cliff face here. The camera will freak out a bit, but that's okay if you have it muscle memorized, you just need to know where to go. And then from here, we're going to tackle jump off the edge of this beam here. When you do a ground tackle off of an edge, if the edge doesn't have an invisible wall around it, like a lot of ledges do, then Ami will continue her ground tackle in the air, which lets you get a ground jump even though you're airborne. And this is a technique we can abuse in a few other places, but here it just makes that jump a bit easier. So from that wall jump, you then just go up here. Alternatively, you can hold forward and wall jump up here, and then just go around, which is a bit slower. So I prefer to do it this way, even though it's a tiny bit more difficult. If you didn't do this trick, which is affectionately called uppy thingy, you would be coming from over here, which you got to by just going around. And again, it only takes about 8 seconds, so it's not a big deal. From here, we just want to tackle in this direction. And then we skip Isun's text, and then we hold brush again to draw a circle. You can draw a very tiny circle like this, or you can draw a bigger one. Obviously the tiny one's going to be faster, so that's what I'm going to recommend. And then you just mash skip again for this next cutscene. This is the cutscene where Isun tosses Mr. Bamboo, and then a bunch of green imps show up, or he tosses Mr. Bamboo to attack the green imps. Or she tosses. Anyway, the first battle here, this is the first battle of the run, because we skipped the first 2 that you're intended to do. You'll see that we actually have 2 ink pots here. This is because we used one to draw the sun, and we have 3 green imps to fight. The easiest way to defeat green imps is to power slash them, and then either power slash them a second time, which always kills them, or to just use a basic attack with your divine instrument, which we'll just call a DI attack for short. But in this case there's 3 of them, and we can't DI all of them with one attack, so it's faster to use 2 power slashes rather than a power slash and a DI, which is normally the fastest way. So in this case we're going to line up the camera at a low angle, and then we're just going to draw a straight line through all of them, and then we're going to do that again. You can see you can actually curve a power slash line a bit in order to hit more targets before it'll stop being recognized as a power slash, but that's fine. At the end of this fight here, we're going to be building dash, and then we're going to jump, because there's this after battle cutscene here. This is a common pattern that we'll be doing in many fights, where there's a fight and then a cutscene. Because the cutscene would normally cause Ami to stop, we have to jump in order to do a dash conservation, but the end of the fight gives us enough time to build dash, which makes it helpful. Even though it's normally hard to conserve dash through a fight, most fights you can just build dash at the end, so it's a lot easier to do that. So in this case, you can see I still have my dash. One thing you would have seen there, but I didn't have time to talk about at the time, was when I picked up the ink pot for the first time, as that one of the green imps dropped when it died, I got a text box. Those text boxes you can just hold the fast text button through, which is the X button on my controller. And whenever you anticipate heading into one of those, just hold the button in advance, because holding the button doesn't do anything if you're already dashing. You can see I'm pressing it and nothing's happening, so you can always press it in advance. The other thing is, sometimes you'll hit those triggers and you'll still be on the ground rather than jumping. In order to avoid losing your dash to a sharp turn, make sure as Ami's frozen collecting the item, while you're holding X, you're also looking at her facing direction, and you're holding the analog stick in the same direction relative to the camera's angle, so that you don't lose your dash to a sharp turn afterwards. Now we're going to be going through here, and the place we want to jump off the cliff here is right about here after this 3rd lantern from the right. So that's what I'm going to do. And we land right here, right next to this chest on this cliff face here. And we can tackle it in order to get a small exorcism slip, or an XS as my guide calls it. It's not that important to conserve dash through here because we're going to be losing it soon anyway. But if you are able to land down here and you're next to the chest, you can just tackle. And as long as you're not holding a direction, you won't lose your dash. So here we're going to then go do the digging minigame. This is necessary because we need to do the digging minigame in order to challenge Hayabusa later to a fight, which we can't skip. So it's the easiest time to do it is right now, and that's what we're going to do. So the strategy here is you're going to be mashing the dig button, which in my case is X, same as the fast text button, and we're going to be power slashing the pot on the top of Mushi's mom's head. That's because it's the thing that stuns her for the longest, about 4 seconds. You can also draw a stroke straight down over her, which will ink her, and that also stuns her for 4 seconds. So just do whatever is more convenient based on the camera angle. In my case, I find with an inner camera, it usually ends up being that a power slash just from center will hit her, and that's the easiest way to ink her, or to stun her. If you power slash her body, she'll still be stunned, but only for 2 seconds. You can get through here with only a handful of stuns, and you want to do the fewest number possible, because as long as you're in the brush mode, you're not digging, obviously. So we're just going to try and mash as quickly as possible. Another thing is, it's possible to avoid collecting... well, I was trying to demonstrate. It's possible to avoid actually picking up any of the radishes, which will give you a text box. This saves like a fraction of a second, so go for it if you can, but it's not a big deal. So let's go for this for real. Usually by the first, before you can even get to, she'll approach you, and you just want to hit her before she can wind up her attack. So here we picked up one of those radishes, and it gave us a text box. If we went forward, she would swing at us as soon as we started digging here, so I'm just going to stun her now, while she's in a good position relative to the camera. And we're just going to continue going around. Usually I try to stun her a bit early, just in case I miss, so that I have more of a warning time. And then once you've gotten all 10 turnips, you get the odd turnip, or Mushi's dad as I like to call it, and we give it to Mushi. And that qualifies us to fight Hayabusa much later in the run. From here, since we're in a good position, we're just going to go this way, and we're going to jump over this fence so that we can restore Pushi's watermill. And then we're just going to wait until she approaches roughly the window, the right window, and then we're going to start mashing skip to skip her text box. At that point, she would normally just walk back and then disappear into here, which is where we're going to go because we want to pick up the sake that she has brewed for Susanoo. She's going to run towards you, but you can just talk to her anyway. You have to talk to her twice, but if she walks towards you, she's actually going to have to walk back to her position before she'll talk to you again, which is annoying. Anyway, just pick up the sake and then leave. It's rather hard to conserve dash through here because it's a pretty small area and it's pretty easy to bomb. So I personally generally don't worry about it, and I'll just walk out because it's not a lot of distance to cover. Another thing to keep in mind is if you press the X button again, you'll drop the sake. You don't want this to happen because if you drop the sake and it disappears, it'll respawn here, which will take a while to get back to if it happens later. So make sure you're careful not to drop the sake by pressing X, which is the same button as you dig with. And otherwise you should just be fine. At this point we're going to go over to this bridge, we can jump on to cut a corner, and we're going to go straight to this guy here. Now you'll notice if I jump towards him, this applies to pretty much, or almost every NPC, he'll get a bit startled. He has that exclamation point mark. That means you can't talk to him because he's startled, right? The nice thing is you can avoid startling NPCs by doing an air tackle in order to get near them rather than just falling, because it's the falling animation which startles them. But the falling animation that happens after an air tackle is different, which means they won't get startled. Once you talk to him, you'll want to make sure that his talking option is here, because if he's startled and you press A, you'll be given a different option. If you look closely, you can see it switches. The other option is to examine the rock, which wastes time. You don't want to do that. So if you do startle him accidentally, wait until he stops being startled and then talk to him. Then skip his text and it'll start a fight. In this fight we have a red imp and 2 green imps. The easiest thing to do is usually to go straight for the red imp and then attack it until it blocks. Then if possible, if it's a good camera angle, which it wasn't there, but I'm just showing this so I can show it, power slash all 3 of them so that you can hit all 3, power slash again to kill the green imps, and then power slash the red imp to kill him if he's not already dead, which he might already be dead depending on the accuracy of your power slashes and how many hits you got in before he blocked. Then after this, there's going to be another cutscene to skip. You'll see I built dash and jumped at the end, just like I did with the first fight. Then this is going to be another cutscene where we can't skip, even though there's text. Which, there's a few of these throughout the run, but this is the first one that you're really going to see. This is going to be the cutscene where Isun teaches you how to use praise, and he's going to open up the pause menu for you to ask you to use your praise on an upgrade. What we want to do is we want to be mashing start and B here to exit out of the praise menu as fast as possible. So it should only come up for a flash. If you do it perfectly, it won't come up at all. And then the cutscene will end. And then this cutscene you can skip as soon as the merchant starts talking. So there's sort of 3 cutscenes there. The restoration cutscene, the praise cutscene, and then the merchant talking again. At this point we want to go to Susanoo's house so we can ask him to cut the boulder. As soon as we approach his house, there's going to be a text box that comes up instantly and he needs to skip it. So we jump into this as well. You can conserve dash into houses and other types of interiors, and you don't need to jump into the portal to do that. But you do need to jump out in order to restore it. So we're actually going to do a tackle jump here, power slash this pot, and we're going to fall directly into the loading zone without touching the ground at all. From here, we can just power slash Susanoo. You don't even have to be that accurate, his hitbox is huge. And that'll startle him. Then we press start, and at this point we can also just tackle jump into the next loading zone again. From here, we can finally restore the dash that we stored going into Susanoo's house by doing this. and then we can go straight out of his house. And as long as we don't get stuck on anything, we can restore dash here as well. Because if you get stuck on an invisible wall and you dash into it, you'll lose your dash, even if you can still have it. It's sort of complicated. See my dash video. I'm not going to explain that again. Here we're going to go straight back to Susanoo. This trigger is based on proximity, so you just have to get close to him, and we can skip again. Then we need to talk to him to start the QTE sequence. The easiest way to get close enough to him, since we can't talk to him from here, is to just tackle. Then press the talk button and hold the fast text button, which is the same as the dig button, as I mentioned earlier. And we're going to start the QTE. So this is another one of those situations where we can power slash things without moving the brush from center, but you have to hold the brush button after the brush comes up. In this case, the sequence is going to be right. Make sure you don't hold the brush button too fast, by the way. Left. That one's quite a narrow margin. Hold the fast text button here for his monologue, and then left again. Then, unfortunately, we still can't skip the text, so we just have to hold the fast text button again throughout the rest of this. Then the last thing we want to do is another right. So overall it's right, left, left, right. And this one, again, we can do it like normal. Here we can actually skip the rest of this as soon as the next cutscene starts. And if we did everything correctly with talking to Susanoo, we can actually conserve our dash here and leave Kamiki Village a bit faster. From here, there's going to be a cutscene with some text that starts as soon as the camera stops panning. That's your cue to start spamming the skip button. And we can't restore dash here because this is another separate area. Kamiki Village is obviously separate from Shinshu, so we have to tackle to get started again. We're going to hug the left wall, get over this fence, and then we're going to jump pretty much right away again because there's another cutscene here, which we can skip right away. This is one where he brings your attention to the guardian sapling that's dead. Then we're going to continue hugging this left wall here and go straight to Hana Valley. And again, you don't have to jump into the portals, it's unnecessary. As soon as we get into Hana Valley, there's going to be a long camera pan, which nothing we can really do anything about, and there's no text in it, so we can't skip it. Sip of water. Make sure you're well hydrated throughout your runs, by the way. This is yet another separate area, so we have to tackle to start off with. And we're just going to go straight, we can jump across this bridge, and we go straight into this trigger. This is for the campfire fight. This is the campfire fight. And then, as soon as that note on the flute stops playing, that's your cue to press the start button, because we're not going to actually fight these imps. We're going to use this exorcism slip that we got in Kamiki to defeat them all immediately. If you want, you can optionally power slash all of them here and get a few free Demon Fangs. Demon Fangs are not necessary in the run, but it does make a few things a bit easier, and I'm going to try to demonstrate how they'll make it easier later. Again, we're going to build dash at the end of the fight here and then store it into this cutscene. This cutscene has a bit of a weird waiting period after it where it doesn't give control to you right away, so you have to just wait that out. Then we restore dash and we go here, we go to the left of this tree, and we jump towards this walloping willow, whatever you want to call it. As soon as the attack from that enemy cherry blossom hits the ground, Isun will talk to you again, and you can skip this too. If you memorize the timing, you can store dash through it by jumping. I just neglected the timing there. None of the other cherry blossoms do that, fortunately, so we can just run right past them. And then there's a cutscene here, where it's going to do another camera pan to bring your attention to this big tablet that had Bowser Jr. right all over it. And then there's another fight trigger here. So this is the single greatest instance of real RNG in the game. There's nothing you can really do here to force this to be faster. The strategy here is, because we can't hit the yellow imp underground, we're instead going to ink him to force him out of the digging animation. And then we're going to kill the green imps while he's wiping the ink off, which, just like Mushi's mom, takes about 4 seconds. Then, after this, we're going to be hoping he does the right attack animation. He has 3 animations that he can do. He can either dig underground right away, in which case we have to ink him before he starts that, in order to reset the cycle again, which wastes another 4 seconds, which is the main way you can lose time here for RNG. He can also jump back without doing a backflip, in which case he'll then dig right afterwards, so you need to ink him then too. Or he can jump back doing a backflip and raising the drum over his head in a projectile attack. If that happens, you just need to run around him like clockwise or counterclockwise to avoid the attack and get close to him, because that's what we're asking him, that's what we want him to do here. Because that attack allows us to actually hit him and kill him quickly. So in this case, he did the right attack, so we had perfect RNG. And then as soon as he turns gray, but not beforehand, as soon as he turns gray, we want to do 3 DIs, 3 Divine Instrument attacks, and then immediately Power Slash him. And if we did that correctly... Well, I guess I just hit the drum instead of his body. If we do that correctly, it'll kill him. Not a great demonstration, but you get the point. If you didn't run out of ink here, you would build dash here, but I ran out of ink, so I can't build dash. At this point, there's another cutscene here, which we can skip, fortunately. And then you can just tackle this way, use pressing the R3 button, which instantly centers the camera behind Ami, and then use that to face the camera towards the tablet and draw a sun. Then, as soon as the next cutscene plays, we can skip it, which is signified by the scroll transition. Then there's another weird waiting period, and then we can either restore our dash, or because we failed to store dash into this, just do a tackle. Then we're going to wall jump up to here. You can do this, which is a bit faster, or you can just wall jump off the far wall. Then here, there's going to be a big camera pan where it shows you this Guardian Sapling Sprout, and then Isun's going to talk, as soon as it freezes over the pond. So at that point, you want to start mashing skip, and then you want to restore dash here as well. Here I'm going to do what I was talking about earlier with power slashing without leaving the ground while still conserving your dash. All you have to do is, if you angle the camera correctly, you can just do left to center, hold up, release the brush button, and then run through, and the gate will be cut. Or you can jump there to make it a bit easier. Then we're going to jump here into the bear cutscene for Susanoo. We skip the first bit of text, and then we hold fast text. The sequence here is going to be left, left. That one looks a bit narrow, but it works. Left, and then right. And after this bit of text, right again. And as soon as the camera angle changes, you can skip. So the sequence there again is left, 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 right, right. 3 lefts and then 2 rights. At that point, now we can, if we have dash, we can use it, but it's not strictly necessary because it's hard to conserve dash completely through this sequence. We're going to jump to the other side of the ball, or just run around it if you can. And then we're going to tackle it to get started, and we're going to tackle it through here. Pushing this ball is rather difficult to do consistently fast, but the strategy here is mostly we push it against that wall, and then we try and get it up the left side here. You can tackle at the ball and nothing will happen, but if the ball is like in front of a wall and you tackle it, the ball will just get out of your way and you'll tackle the wall and bounce, which wastes time. Once we get it against here, but from pushing it up this ramp, which is usually what happens, you push it up here and it'll fly against this wall. You jump behind it to get it away from the wall, and then you tackle like straight here towards the pond. And it should follow you and just fall into the pond, which is quite easy. At this point, you can't really conserve dash consistently, so I wouldn't bother. As soon as the ball has done like 5 bounces, that's how I count it, you can skip Isun's text, and then you tackle backwards, wait until the camera angle changes, brush, drag the brush up without moving the camera angle, because camera angle here doesn't actually help you, and then draw some. And as soon as the camera angle changes again, we can skip, or well, as soon as the scroll transition happens. At this point, then we have the next constellation, which is for Bloom. This one's pretty easy, both of them are straight up, so you can just tap up, brush, and you'll get it. Then we skip again, then we hold brush again for blooming this cherry blossom, we just do a big circle upwards, starting either clockwise or counterclockwise, and then we skip. And then we actually have to skip two things here, one for the restoration cutscene, and one for Isun's talking. At this point, we want to tackle and conserve dash through this cave. These two ledges are auto jumps, so you don't actually need to jump up to them. Then we're going to hug this wall, jump here, roughly, don't hug the cave wall here, and jump here. You have to have gold dash going into this, and this is actually right when gold dash starts being gold, I should mention, is when you get bloom. So again, we're going here, we jump roughly past this marking here, this big vertical line, and then we try to go around, like along the cave wall, but we don't want to hug the cave wall specifically because it'll cause our air tackle to get stuck in place because we get stuck on the wall. So we want to peel just away from the wall before we air tackle. And then we air tackle farther along the direction of the wall in order to reach about farther than halfway across the room. And if you did that correctly, you will skip a trigger for a repeat of the yellow imp fight we had earlier. Again, that fight was RNG, so obviously we don't want to do another one of that because it would waste time. If you do that fight, just follow the same strategy. Afterwards, even if you don't do that fight, like fight or not, go over here and just jump it towards this cherry, because Isun's going to talk about the enemy cherry trees again, and try and conserve dash through this if possible. He's also going to talk about this cursed patch here, which we can skip again, and we can just restore dash through that. From here, we're mostly going to be taking a straight path out of Hana Valley, except we're going to want to bloom at least one cherry. I'm not strictly sure if this is necessary in this run, but I recommend doing it. It's necessary in one of the routes, but I can't remember if it works out as being necessary in this route. Just don't stress out too hard about it if you forget to do this. I don't think it's necessary technically, but just for peace of mind, I'll do it. I prefer this one because it's right along your path. It's the easiest for the camera, and you only need the one extra praise. Like, it actually does matter. Also, you don't have to do this if you hit the second yellow imp fight trigger. The second yellow imp fight skip is pretty difficult until you get used to the exact mechanism for it. So if you accidentally hit the yellow imp fight, it gives you praise at the end, which means you don't need to do this. From here, we're going to want to go here. And here's a repeat of the campfire fight, just like there was a repeat of the yellow imp fight, there's a repeat of this too. We can actually skip this one by going to the right of this torch, which I'm going to show you here. You don't have to be that strict about it, the trigger's not that big, but it's also not that small, so just be a bit careful. And then we just leave Hana Valley normally. After this loading zone, there's going to be an immediate Isun text, and this takes about 2 full meters, or 1 full meter I should say. And then we skip that, and we tackle again because this is another separate area. Then finally we are going to bloom Shinshu. You do have to jump off of this ledge to get close enough without having to go all the way around. But if you wait too long before brushing, you'll hit the curse zone and Isun will talk, which is bad. So we want to do it just before we hit the curse zone. Make a circle around the tree, and then just skip the restoration cutscene. Same thing applies for every sapling. We skip the restoration cutscene after we bloom it. Also, one thing that applies to every restoration cutscene is you can't conserve dash through them. So even though I had dash coming into it, I can't restore dash out of it because cursed Shinshu is a different area from uncursed Shinshu. So we have to tackle here. In this case, what we're going to want to do is we're going to tackle to the left and talk to this merchant. We don't have anything to sell yet, but we do have something we want to buy, which is the Steelfist Sake, or SFS. We're going to buy 2 of them. If you could afford to buy 3, it's not necessarily wrong, but there's no reason to. So if you can, it's up to you. We would buy another one later anyway, but it doesn't really make much of a difference. After that, we're going to be going this way. We're targeting here the Moon Cave Shrine, where Mika is, because we want to turn it night in order to get Cherry Bomb, which we can only get when it is night. And the fastest way to turn it to night is to abuse the fact that the tutorial sequence for wanted lists turns it to night. And we can get the wanted list here very quickly. So we're going to talk to Mika twice. He won't give you the wanted list the first time, only the second. And then we leave. You don't need to conserve dash here because you lose it in the fight anyway. And then we want to hold fast text through this tutorial. Now this is the time where you would need to be able to recognize Japanese characters, if nothing else. In this case, I can read that the enemy is Biwamaru. Whenever you have a wanted list fight, and this is the only one we're going to have in the run, but if you ever have another one, you only need to kill the wanted monster, and the others will die immediately, so don't waste your time on the green imps here. Just run over and attack Biwamaru or whoever you end up with. It's random. Power slash him after he blocks, then just power slash again if necessary. It was necessary. My mistake. And of course, like I said, the other enemies all died immediately. As soon as this fight ends, Isen's going to talk, so hold fast text again. And then he's going to ask you to cross out the line. The recognition on this is a bit weird. Sometimes it won't recognize, even though it seems like it should. You pretty much only need to go over the area what the text is. You don't need to go over the whole bar. And also, you sort of need to cross from the top half of the bar to the bottom, but only barely. So sort of do like a gently sloping line in one direction. The order of the names here is always the same. It's always Onimaru, Biwamaru, Akuzo, Izo, and Toya in every language with the equivalent spellings of the names. So if you know if you can read which imp you got, you can prepare which line you need to hit right away. In this case, we need to hit the second one, which is Biwamaru. Then we hold fast text again through the rest of it, and it's open. So at this point, we need to cross this lake. In this case, if we don't use the mashing trick to mash jump to swim faster, then we'll drown. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to abuse the fact that we can actually walk on the water a bit here. And even if you don't have dash, this will still work, but you want to conserve dash here, so try to if you can. From the very edge of the walkable water, do a tackle jump, and then just use the outer cam to take a straight line toward the dock there. And if you did it correctly, you should make it with a tiny bit of breath left. Then we want to go here, we want to hug this, this dark area next to the cliff in order to not aggro this scroll. And then there's going to be another fight trigger here for the fight with a dead fish. This fight's pretty simple, but it's kind of RNG as well. We need to wait until the dead fish's body appears, and then we need to power slash it 3 times in order to kill it. Ideally, the green imps line up so that we can power slash them as well. We need to power slash them 2 times. So this would be a good lineup because we can get all of them with 1 stroke. So we power slash all 3 of them twice, and then we can power slash just the dead fish the 3rd time. And that kills everyone. Another thing you'll notice at the end of some fights, if you don't have any ink, even if you pick up ink bottles from the dying enemies, you won't get your markings restored. This, I don't know exactly why it happens, but I think it has to do with some sort of lockout period. After enemies die, if you don't pick up the ink bottle fast enough, you sort of get locked out of getting any actual ink back. And that's just something you want to try to avoid. Usually I just stand under where the ink bottle spawns, and that works. Here we're going to talk to Tama, or Tamaya in Japanese, and we have to talk to him 3 times. You can mash start throughout all of it, and then after the 3rd time we want to hold brush, and we want to draw a cherry bomb. Now you'll see I drew the cherry bomb a bit weird here. I did sort of a circle, and then I did a line through the whole circle. This is the fastest way to consistently draw cherry bombs that I'm aware of, and it's what I recommend you do. So you sort of start with going this way, like left or right, then you do a full circle, and then at the end of that circle you let go of your draw button, but you don't let go of the control stick. You move it slightly to the direction you were going in, which in this case you can see I did it counterclockwise. So I was still going right at the end of the circle. I let go of the analog stick, I pressed it again to start this line, and then I just went straight right. and that gives you a pretty consistent cherry bomb every time. Then we want to skip, and we have another constellation. And at the end of this one, we can skip as well. Don't hold the brush here, because if you hold the brush here, it'll brush on a weird camera angle. I don't know why. Just hold fast text, because you can't skip this. It's a tutorial. And then do another one of those fast cherry bombs. It takes some practice to consistently get cherry bombs to recognize, and even I still mess it up sometimes. You can actually skip at his text after this, by the way. So cherry bomb recognition is sort of a skill that you have to just develop with practice. It's not that important that you get every cherry bomb perfectly every time. When you're starting out, try to be a bit more careful with it, so to mess them up less. And then as you go on, try to draw them more quickly without losing accuracy. That's how I would recommend learning. From here, unless you're able to conserve dash through that, which is possible, but annoying, you'll have to tackle here. Hug the right cliff face there to avoid that scroll that we just passed by, because we don't want to do any fights we don't have to. If you do accidentally hit a fight, you can escape fights by tackling the glowing spots on the walls, as the game tells you. And that's what you want to do. You never want to have to actually fight an optional fight. In this case, as we approach this Devil Gate, we're going to get a cutscene. The trigger is pretty much just past this path here, so just jump as soon as you walk over the path, and then go through the gate. In this case, the first enemy is going to be another yellow imp. Fortunately, we don't have to deal with RNG, because now we have Cherry Bomb, which lets us kill it through the ink. So we draw a Cherry Bomb in front of it, and that'll blow it up. Then we just need to attack it one time, and we can instantly power slash it to kill it. And it's way faster than waiting for it to wipe the ink off. In this case, the two imps were relatively close to each other, so I could just do a power slash plus a DI instead of two power slashes. And then one thing you'll notice is I actually inked the yellow imp while it's still in the air. As long as you touch its body, you'll still ink it. You can't touch its shadow, but you can touch its body. Or, like, touching its shadow doesn't work. You have to touch its body. And then it'll instantly snap to the ground, and then you can ink it. So here we're going to draw another cherry bomb in front of it, and we're going to do the same thing we did before. And this is what we're going to do for every single yellow imp fight. It's the fastest way. At the end of this fight, we want to build dash and jump to store dash. And then we want to press start to skip the restoration cutscene. This text isn't skippable, so just hold the fast text button. Then we want to turn around, and we want to jump on this rock, then jump on this cliff face. If you jump from just the right spot, you won't have to wall jump here, but usually it's easier to just wall jump. From here, we're going to be doing the first major skip of the run, which is we're going to be skipping the Lilypad ability. Normally, you have to get the Lilypad ability by going back to Kamiki and blooming all of the cherry blossoms, which takes a while. And you have to do Mr. Bamboo's dance, which unfortunately we skip in this run. But instead we're going to be doing a mildly difficult trick in order to skip it. This trick, if you want to practice it, I would recommend saving over in the center of Shinshu. You can even do that before we did any of the stuff with like the wanted list, just to save time, just so you can practice that whole segment, because there's a lot of movement involved. But if you just want to practice this skip, you can just practice it alone once you get Cherry Bomb. Basically, with the gold dash from here, we're going to jump off this pier. This part isn't that important, but it's a bit faster. We do a tackle jump off of it, which lets you do a ground jump from midair. And we're going to get to this water here. So this water here you can actually stand on. It's similar to the water near the Moon Cave Shrine, where you can stand on it. And we're going to use that to get a boost over here. That wasn't actually a very good boost. You could get by with this, but I just want to demonstrate this. Usually I do a tackle jump off the water here. Similar to using tackle jumps to get grounded jumps in the air, you can use them to get grounded jumps in the water. And then we're going to want to mash jump to get through this cave. You don't have very much breath here, so we need to be mashing constantly in order to make it to where we need to be. So basically, you're intended to get Lilypad so that you can put a Lilypad here and then wall jump up this cliff, since you can't jump out of the water normally. Fortunately, there's a bit of a glitch with the way auto jumps work in Okami, so an auto jump is just when the game jumps for you up a ledge. In most cases, when you're in the water, if there's a ledge that's relatively short, Ami will just auto jump up it as you approach, as long as you're not mashing jump, which is an important distinction here. If you're mashing jump, you can't actually do auto jumps in certain places, whereas if you're not mashing, you can do them here, which so basically we're going to need to stop mashing jump as we approach the spot that we're trying to auto jump here. Basically, there's a bit of a glitch called corner jumps, where if you approach a corner while you're in the water and the corner is acute enough, Ami will jump up it even though there's not a surface to jump onto, which we can use in order to get out of the water. Sorry, the camera's not behaving here very well. So we're going to use this corner here. You can see the cave gets a bit jaggedy here. As in the first major corner that you see on the left side of these like 3 divots, so this divot here, we're going to want to corner jump into it. While we're in the air, we want to drift slightly right, and then we want to jump off like this. We want to wall jump off like this surface as we're falling. If you do it at the peak of your jump, you'll hit the ceiling of the cave and lose your speed, and you won't be able to make the jump. So you want to do it as you're falling so that you start from a lower height, which means you won't hit the ceiling, which means you'll be able to make the jump. So in this case, we're going to be like jumping up here, then you fall a bit, you do a wall jump like here, and then we're going to be jumping towards the right edge of this cliff face here, and we're going to tackle just as we fall to the lowest height that will still get you up the ledge. So I'm going to demonstrate that here. So you can see that I barely made it, because the angle is a bit weird there, but it's not terribly difficult. This trick does take some practice. You should maybe see other footage of it. Just look up some other runs, since it's in every any% run, or new game any% run. And try to understand the mechanism of this trick. It will take practice to get it at first. If you really want to practice it a bit more easily, you can go and get Lilypad and just practice the jump by putting like a Lilypad here so you can refresh your breath. If you do drown here, which is possible, if say you hit the ceiling, you won't be able to swim back to the divot to do another auto jump. Then you'll just drown and you'll end up where you started on the walkable water, and then you can just try again. But if you run out of health here, then obviously it's run over. It would take too long to get more health, but that's not an important thing. This trick is easy enough that you can consistently do it first try with practice. Once you get up here, which may take some extra jumping at the edge of the cliff, just draw another quick cherry bomb here and tackle through, and that'll bring us to a gata where I'm going to end this video off. Thank you for watching. I will probably upload more videos of this within the next coming weeks, and I'll try and get through the whole run of it. This video was over an hour long, but the segment it covers is under half an hour from the beginning of the run, so that gives you an idea of how much time I wasted just talking. For your first run, don't worry about time too much. Try to focus on learning the tricks, understanding the mechanics that we're abusing in order to go as fast as possible, and just get consistent. Make sure you use practice saves before tricks that you're having trouble with, so that you can practice them more quickly later. And don't be afraid to ask questions in the Okami Discord. I'm pretty much always in there, so I can always answer questions about the written guide or about this video. You can also ask in the comments of this video or on Twitter, all of which will be linked in the description. Thanks for watching. Ciao.